Hello. We're back. We're back for another episode of Love at First Right. Give me two strong arms to protect myself. Give me so much love that I forget myself. That's just our motto here, isn't it? Um, and this is my vlog where we talk about writing, how to do it well, how to do it in a way that's satisfying for the writer and the reader, and really just make it sing off the page, right? And today I want to talk about war, writing about war. War is so often the either centerpiece or the backdrop for great stories of just about every genre. It's not just the historical genre or the thriller genre. It is mystery. It is science fiction. It is romance. Some of the greatest romances ever written or filmed have been wartime romances. Because it is just, there's a reason why we call a battleground a theater, right? When we're hearing World War II being talked about, there's the European theater and there is the Asian theater, and it's a term that is used in so many languages too. It's not just English, and it's no wonder because just about every important human experience, human emotion, and human value is expressed either actively in a war, on a battlefield, or during a war, and the way it pulls everybody into it, from the women historically who have been keeping the home alive, who have been caring for the children while their brothers and husbands are away, and they don't know if they're coming back. Women who have been the nurses typically throughout war, and now women who are also fighting wars. Right? That's something relatively new that we are dealing with, because war. Battle has historically been something, a burden that has been exclusively for men, and it is a burden, and it is also potentially great making. So it's very, very complicated because in war we have, oh God, we have honor, we have faith, we have character, we have love, we have loyalty, we have patriotism, we have family. All of these things are things that we are fighting for in a war. We're fighting for our very existence. We are fighting for everything we value, and that is an incredibly powerful thing to bring into a fictional story. And writing about war can be really precarious, because the fact is, if you write about it unidimensionally, either over glorifying it or over vilifying it, with a sort of, uh, I wouldn't even say overly skeptical lens, but overly simplified lens, either one way or the other, most of the time you are in very, very big danger of not giving the audience what they need. In the experience, because audiences are very well aware that there are many, many things going on during a time of war, and many, many contradictions. I mean, one of the most interesting contradictions for me is I remember reading about how during a time of war, mental illness goes down pretty precipitously, even mental illnesses like schizophrenia, which are very difficult to treat and don't tend to go down up and down very much, during sort of, regular cultural fluxes. But during a time of war, even really hardcore mental illnesses like schizophrenia take a pretty statistically significant dip. Perhaps because we are focused on something so much bigger than us, and mental illness can be incredibly self-focused. I mean, it is part of the loneliness of mental illness is when we are looking too much into ourselves. And so that's something to consider when we write about this. And one of the things that I most really like to consider, because I think it's what makes a story fascinating, and it's also what is really kind of difficult to do, is looking for the meaning in war and looking for actually the very good things about it. I mean, I hate to use good because it makes it sound like it's trying to put a happy face on it, and that's actually the last thing that I want to do, because um, that's just not accurate. But there is tremendous meaning in war. Everything that we are fighting for has meaning. The repercussions of war have meaning: death, disfigurement, love, um, camaraderie. There's tremendous camaraderie during war. All of these things are so rich and ripe and ready for us writers to sink our teeth into, to create a story that is really going to grab our readers by the lapel and hopefully take them on an interior journey that that will be meaningful for them without actually having to go and get shot at, right? Or having to suffer through their somebody in their family having to go and get shot at, or maybe if they are someone who went and actually did get shot at, and war was something very immediate and personal for them because they experienced it, maybe a story can help them make sense of it and sort of put things together in their mind. Um, so, just sort of on a tactical level, one of the reasons why writing about war is so precarious is because it's incredibly confusing. And how often you can read, say, a battle scene, which is very directly about war, right? It's not writing around war the way the way a lot of stories do. It's not merely taking place during a time of war. But whenever you're writing a battle, I think one of the most important things that we need to keep in mind is clarity. And we need to follow the person, the character who we are experiencing this through, very carefully. Otherwise, we can get lost and it can just become a confused mess. And I think that in terms of writing a battle scene, that when we sit down to write a battle scene, one of the most important things that we could have is distance from it. Not the first time we write it. The first time we write it, I think you've just got to get it out and you've got to use all of the energy that you have to and force it onto the page, because there's so much going on and there is so much raw energy in a battle. And there are, it is such a feast for the senses. It's not always a good feast, right? Because there are fecal smells. Men and women lose their bowels on a battlefield. There is a raw sexuality to a battlefield. Men can spontaneously ejaculate during battle and not even realize it. There's sweat, the very pungent smell of fear on a person. Um, it is dirty. It is bloody. The taste of iron in your mouth. All of this is going on. All the while, you're also shooting, or if it's happening in the past, it could be hand-to-hand combat. You're using a knife, you're using a sword, you're using a bludgeon. You're doing whatever you need to do to stay alive and kill that other person. And it's very important to get that energy on the page. If you have too much distance from it the first time you write it down, it can fall flat. But at the same time, when you write with that kind of energy, it can be disjointed, it can be frazzled, it can just be a complete mess. And so, at least for me, and hopefully this will be helpful, when I sit down and I write a battle scene and I put all that energy into it and I just you know um, get it all down on the page, I take at least a day, hopefully, ideally two, before I sit down to it again. Because if you do not get that distance, let's put it this way, if I do not get that distance, maybe you don't have the same experience. If I don't get that distance from that battle, then I can't see where I've made mistakes. I can't see where I haven't um, followed the character. I mean, I've read many battle scenes where I lose where I am because I'm reading and I think that the character is doing one thing and then suddenly they're on the floor or suddenly they've stabbed someone in the neck. Well, where did they get the knife? Where did that knife come from? It's stuff like that that you can very easily, when you are in the fervor of writing that initial battle scene, just kind of forget to connect those dots. Forget to say he remembered that he had a dagger in his back pocket or whatever it is, and then pull that out and stick it in the other character's neck or whatever it is that you're going to do with it. And so I think that battle scenes, unless you're very, very lucky and you manage to nail it the first time that you just got it out, which does happen on occasion, it's a process. It's a process in terms of getting the energy down, and then later, and then in terms of getting the clarity down, and then later in terms of getting the color and the senses down. And that's the process that I take through a battle scene: energy, clarity, the senses, layering it like a painting. Um, and that process is incredibly important to me in writing because with it's not like in film where you have the visual, because battles are incredibly visual, um, and you really have to build all that yourself. You have to build the sights, you have to build the smells, and very, very importantly, you have to build the map, the clarity, so that people know exactly what is happening. And that's also an incredibly important part of keeping the energy. Because if people don't know what's happening, it takes them out of the battle, it takes them out of the scene. So you're going, oh my god, your character's doing all of these amazing things, he's almost getting killed, and then he kills this guy, and then he's on the floor, and then he's up, and then suddenly, if you lose the reader, you have lost momentum, and your battle scene has just taken a nosedive. So that is something that's very important in terms of the actual battles that you might be writing, whether they are between just two individuals, if you're writing, say, a spy story and it's like spy versus spy, or you're writing a bigger, more sort of epic story that includes a battle. Now, then there is, now we're going to move on to writing about war as a background. So, some of the stories we write may never see a battle, right? They just take place during war. Or you might have both, right? If you're writing some sort of historical epic or even a space opera, it might take place during a time of war, and yet you also have individual battles, and it's I think incredibly important to be able to connect those. If you have both a battle and a war background, to have some kind of tissue that connects them is crucial, and it keeps the reader engaged. And usually that tissue is a value, is something that the character is fighting for, even if they're fighting on the wrong side. And maybe that value is love. Maybe that value is family, a brother, doing something for a brother. That can be, enormously compelling. And it also goes a long way towards bringing meaning into the work, meaning to this war that is either the focus or the backdrop of your story, that is informing every single thing that your character does and thinks about, even if it seems unrelated. And that's what's so important about something like war, because it is so pervasive, it is so important. It becomes a part of everything that your characters do, even when what they're doing, it seems totally unrelated, even when they're making love, even when they're making dinner, a feast. That feast could feel like it's one of the last, or it could be barely scrounged together because they're making it from rations, but damn it, they're going to have a feast because it's Christmas. All of these very human details bring the story alive and help us make it mean something for the reader, make it mean something for us, but also in a larger sense. It's like the gosh, Nancy Griffith does a terrific version of this song, From a Distance. From a distance, she sings, I can see what all this war is for. So, hope that's helpful. I think it's helpful for me because what a coincidence. I'm going to sit down and write about war today, about an ancient war that a couple of characters are experiencing in 1902 in Cairo. And they are, through dreams and a series of quasi-paranormal events, experiencing a war that happened 6,000 years earlier. So how do you like that? That's a challenge for today. Thanks.